Yeah.
And we're recording.
Really? There's no indication of it.
We're live.
Okay. Well, it occurs to me, fellas, that last episode I may have insulted all of New Zealand by comparing them to North Korea. I've been thinking about this a lot, especially as my son has discovered the wealth of other Power Rangers options available in Netflix. You've got your time travelers, your samurai, your jungle fury, and probably other ones we haven't even discovered yet. And I didn't really mean to imply that New Zealand looks like North Korea. It was more so that whenever they're filming in their New Zealand location, in Power Rangers Dino Thunder, there's never anyone really in the streets. So it's all like empty with these big, impressive, great-looking buildings, like you see in those pictures of North Korean cities that have no one in them. That's all.
This just in, New Zealand listeners, we love you.
That's
North
right.
Korea listeners, congratulations on getting internet.
Yeah, I'm open to consideration.
Coach, did someone email? Was there some
No,
feedback from New Zealand about the comparison?
No, it's been a few weeks since we recorded, so I've had some time to churn over the episode in my head several times, and I thought I didn't mean to say that it was like North Korea there. It looks nice. They've got a beach that backs up to a rainforest, apparently. And you know what else they have in New Zealand? If according to Power Rangers, lots of explosions. Lots and lots of explosions, just right and left, and pizza parlors.
So, okay. All I know about New Zealand is mostly, Lord of the Rings and sheep. So,
Power Rangers need more sheep. If they're not emphasizing the sheep thing, then
this is true. I think the New Zealand Travel Council didn't do a very good job hustling with the Power Ranger people.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of hustling, that's the segue that doesn't work at all. But have you noticed that all these big companies are divorcing themselves? We skipped recording last week when HP had their big announcement, but I just saw it come across the wire. I've got that over there. This little machine that ticker tapes things out. That Symantec was talking about breaking itself up, I guess, into security and what's the other thing they do? Storage? Yeah, security and storage. And and then there's rumors of like people wanting Cisco to do things. Things are crazy out there if you're a public tech company. Seems odd. So, not having done any numbers or financials like you would expect a normal analyst would have done before commenting on stuff like this. Let me deflect to you guys. What's up with these big companies splitting up? Is this is Chef going to be splitting up, Matt Ray, into the open source and the closed source one? What's going on? Is this in the future now?
You got two questions there. Well, no, let me take the Chef and open source. Actually, no. We're
no rumors to that account.
No,
okay.
Absolutely not. Even the opposite of that. We're open sourcing more.
We're going to take the DSL is going to be one company, and the agent is going to be another company. It just doesn't make sense for them to be together.
Like Windows and Linux, it's like peanut butter and chocolate. You don't want those things together.
Will Morgan Stanley be advising on the breakup, and can I help with the naming of the new companies? We'll have Chef Open Source and Chef Enterprise.
But that's the beauty of it. Chef Enterprise is now open source too.
Whoa.
Blowing
my mind. Yeah. Blowing my mind right there.
But anyways, I bring up that absurd example to kind of like contrast with there are tech companies. I mean, you guys are much smaller than these behemoths, but I guess the assumption I have with the tech company is that it makes sense to have all these products together. You have, what do you call them? Synergies. I suppose there's always two options for splitting a company up. One of them is, as people will cynically call it, financial engineering, which I'm never really sure if that's good, bad, or what that means. And the other one is, I guess it just doesn't make sense to have the companies together portfolio-wise. Like, I remember reading, I forget in which business book, to do the business book part of our episode, that at one point Sears owned a personal investing company, like Sears and Roebuck, because they thought it would be a good idea, and then they realized that was a terrible idea.
Well, is it a terrible idea? I mean, you see companies like Walmart, diversifying into managing, like doing banking. because their customers don't have good access to banking. And so you see how they get on that path of like,
Yeah.
oh, we're doing banking and small loans and financing the purchase of your washing machine.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it. That reminds me also, apparently eBay and PayPal are going to split up. Speaking of,
I mean, didn't GM spin off GMAC a while back? Because they had a whole huge financial arm just around finance.
Is that where you get that powder to bulk up at the GMAC? I remember.
Yes, exactly. They spun off their protein shakes division.
That was always an odd investment, I thought, for GE. Light bulbs, turbines, bulk up. I guess that's how they get the turbines so big and lightweight.
Yeah, but I mean, you see how these companies, they eventually evolve to the point where they're doing, everything. And, sometimes maybe they are too big to exist, or, as you see when HP splits up, they're going to be, two companies, both the size of Dell. And I think I saw a nice quote from Josh McKenty, that both sides are happy to be split with the other side. The other side is full of idiots that are holding them back. And, maybe they're both right? I mean, there's a lot of conflicting interest between things like, storage and PC sales versus, enterprise sales. And I know when Novell split up, the SUSE folks were like, hey, now we get to go sell Linux instead of, trying to sell Novell groupware and file sharing. And, we can focus on, just being an operating system company.
Yeah. No, it is, having worked inside Dell, it is a bit of cognitive dissonance that you have to spend a lot of time on to have like a consumer PC business and then an enterprise business. It's, it's possible to do stuff with it, but it does make a cleaner conceptual break, which is interesting. And of course, it also, not in contrast, but in parallel, interesting informedness. Can you tell I haven't had enough coffee yet today? Like IBM is pretty good at like getting rid of stuff. I mean, I was thinking earlier this morning in preparation for rambling on this show that they generally before they don't really split up, they just eject things. And maybe as you get to be a larger and larger tech company or company in general, if I had an MBA, maybe I would just know this. But eventually you start just sloughing off things. Is that how you pronounce that when like skin falls off of you? SLOUGH or something?
Sloughing.
But it just sloughing. There.
I think, Cote, I think that's the interesting one issue with HP is, they're kind of going this route of like, having their cake and eating it too, right? I think the logical way or the traditional way is like sell off the assets.
Yeah.
Other companies that make sense. And why are we just gonna have two things? It probably makes more sense to put some of these assets with new people, right? But you can almost see, and even in the branding that they came up with, you could almost see kind of the handprints of compromise on everything. It was like, well, wait a minute. Okay, you get to be HP, you get to keep that, but we'll be Hewlett Packard. Okay, and then
that is.
And you keep this. Whereas the eBay one, I think, is a much more. It's like, okay, PayPal is a unique business that is probably being encumbered by being part of this other thing, and they have a clear brand, and it makes a lot of sense, right? So, but that's why the HP thing, I think, I wouldn't be. Worried about. I mean, just kind of like thinking about long term. And then, of course, I think you had a link to it, the inevitable, and we're going to cut 55,000 jobs, right? So
right.
That one just feels a lot more like that's like this is the first act in a very long play.
Yeah. No, I remember last week we were emailing about it, and I was like mysteriously upset and depressed, to you guys. And it is like, I mean, that's there's two things why it was. I've gotten over myself why it was sort of like disheartening. One of them was, it'll sound kind of weird, but it's sort of like I always want I don't want these guys, these people to give up. Like it's almost like screw it, split the company up. And it's like, they should have tried to figure it out. It's more entertaining to watch them.
You just didn't want to have to build so many different companies. You're like, can't there just be two?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm like, that little title on my invoice cannot fit all of the characters in Hewlett Packard Enterprise. That's pretty long.
HPE.
But, yeah, no, but more appropriately, it is like, you know, having been in the position where I had to like sit in a room for a day and lay off a bunch of people who I didn't even know, like being laid off and laying off people sucks. And it's kind of like 55,000 people is a lot of people. And I think I almost joked, sardonically, to use that word appropriately, that like, man, who screwed up their spreadsheet that year that they're like, oh, it turns out we don't need 55,000 people. Like that's a lot of people.
that is a lot of people. But you said IBM has IBM's laid off a lot of people over the years, and then they've rejected all these other business lines that they don't make PCs anymore. They got out of monitors, and HP tried to shop some of these properties around, and there was not enough appetite to bite off such a huge company, and so you do what you do.
Right, but I think there is. I mean, I guess maybe the flip side is like, how does somebody get there? To your point about the 55,000, Cote. It's
exactly.
And I think the company, and I think you're starting to see this with like Cisco and other places. It's like, okay, a company starts with a truly profitable business, and I think HP, and we could point to printers, right? And then what happens is there's that desire for growth, so the company starts to expand in all these different directions. And then, in the case of HP, it's like clearly it's grown up, and there are lots of projects and products and initiatives they've taken on that aren't working, right? That need to just go away. And it's unfortunate this has gotten so massive. And I think if there's a good thing that's coming out of this is like Cisco's a good example, right? I mean, clearly Cisco makes a ton of business from routers, and switches. And, just because they make that much money there doesn't mean they should be buying, the flip can. Okay, right. And then should they buy WebEx? And are these truly businesses that are standalone? And I'm sure there are many projects within Cisco that people are just being funded because they have so much extra money. So, I mean, there is a kind of a healthy portfolio rationalization that's going on where I think Wall Street and people are saying, listen, just because you have all this other money, I'm not going to let you just get into anything, right? And I think you could go, 10 years from now, I wonder if we're going to have the conversation about Google. Someone's like, we need to spin out the Google ads business because we don't want the cloud and like whatever.
Cars.
And all this other stuff,
the glasses,
right? Like why? Yeah, the glasses. Like, why are you guys doing all this? We really are. The money's over here, and I think companies as they grow, they just have to, especially when they're in the mammoth growth stage, have to be really careful. And to Google's credit, they do seem to kill off products faster than other companies when they're not working. But I think you have to kind of keep doing that, or otherwise you get to a point where it's just like HP, where it's like, wow, this is incredible.
And to your point, I mean, that's the part that annoys and slightly saddens me about things like this. Is what you're saying is like how does management let it get to that point? And then not even to put the blame on solely on management, but it's also how do we as a tech industry, how could we like fix the work culture we have so that that's kind of normal and expected? And so, for example, if a startup just shuts down all of a sudden, you're like, oh, forget about it. It's Chinatown, right? Like whatever. That's how startups work. Like it's easy come, easy go. Maybe not so easy come, but whatever. And whereas it seems like if you're one of these like gigantic behemoth companies, for whatever reason, the expectation is a little less dynamic. Is that the way to put it? The expectation is that it'll be a little more stable. Whereas I haven't really seen a successful tech company culture that sort of embraces the fact that you could be fired tomorrow and commiserately rewards you accordingly, right? And you're reminding me with your Cisco example, Brandon, like I haven't finished reading that Halo Effect book that we recommended a long time ago, but there's I'll assume it's mostly true. The guy's kind of cynical, if you will, but there's a really great historic profile of Cisco throughout the boom years and then like in the oh shit years, and like how things panned out at that company, kind of fitting a lot of what you were saying, where there's just like so much wild growth and money that everything was awesome. And of course, the point the guy in the Halo Effect makes is that whenever there's lots of growth and high share point, you reverse engineer that management is doing a great job. And then like within days, if the share price goes down, it turns out management was doing an awful job. Yep. And it's a nice overview of the Halo Effect, if you will.
But to your point, I mean, this is something I've sort of encountered more recently for a couple of different reasons. But, I think about like, there's obviously the companies themselves, like, hey, we want to do these new projects. We want to hire people. And then there's, people out looking for jobs that want to come on as employees. Well, I've just recently kind of been exploring like, hey, I would love to come in and do targeted projects. And like kind of, and I think there's that book from the LinkedIn founder talking about like the new model, right? The idea that, there's sort of this implicit kind of thing that happens today where, you go interview for a job and the company kind of like they offer you, perpetual employment forever, right? But really, everybody knows like as an employee, especially in tech, you're probably not going to be at that job forever and the company may need to let you go, right? So, one proposal is like try to be more honest. Would be like, hey, let's come in and do something for a fixed period of time, and
right.
And then if that is successful, then let's keep going. And some of the stuff with healthcare changing and things like that, I think maybe makes the whole workforce more mobile. But I'll say this though, having talked to people about that, it's like no one's set up for it. Like if you go to a company and they want to offer you a job, and you say, well, hey, instead of giving me a job, why don't we just do this on a part-time or contractual basis? It's like, well, the system just
the first question is, are you in our purchasing system? And then
it's like,
conversation's over.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, and even when people are very open to it on both sides, just what you said, there is no way to, and you think that would be so easy, right? Because it's like, you're not giving me benefits. You're not doing this stuff. And I'm just going to send you an invoice. And I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. You can't do that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a problem there or a way to solve it, but I think it would be great if there was a time where you could sign up for a project. I know Google, I've talked to Google before, like why they don't do that part of it. They do have the notions of projects and moving within them and a beginning and an end and not staying with one thing forever.
Right.
Which again, seems very realistic. In contrast to many other companies.
I mean, I've seen contract to hire in smaller startups, a few times. I've done some of that with different folks, and I've seen it, and we've had people kind of spin in and spin out where we do hire them, like, oh, well, we know your work and we'll send you projects as we go, but it's usually like under extenuating circumstances, like, oh, you're not in the US anymore, or, you can't work for us for whatever reason. Companies don't really like that. But on the flip side, there's never the discussion of like, so where do you see yourselves in 15 years at this company? You're like, no. I mean, like my parents were so disappointed when I got out of school and had no interest in going to IBM. They were like, you could be there forever. It would be awesome. And, my dad did, 25 years in the Air Force and 15 years at the state. And I'm like, I'm now coming up on my anniversary of 4 years at Chef. It's the longest I've ever been anywhere. Mind is blown. I'm just like, oh man, there's so many places I haven't worked yet.
do they give you like a gold USB drive or something when you hit 4 years? What do they hand out?
Way to go.
Good job. Checking more code.
Yeah. You're vested. Congrats. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So Brandon brought this up. What do you guys do internally in so much as you can share there at the Chef? Are people kind of like bound to projects they work on, or is there a cycle of moving people around, or how does it pan out?
I mean, we're pretty small. So projects have, there's been a lot of internal shuffling and, people moving around. I mean, for example, I started here, I was employee 16. So now we're about 200. I've moved around a whole lot, right? Yeah. I was in a group called Training Services, Evangelism, and Support.
Yeah.
And, now those are all like different groups of people. And, worked my way through, into consulting and engineering, and now I'm in biz dev, and I've reported to lots of different people. I had lots of different teams.
It's very fluid, your situation there.
It's very fluid, but one of the things that kind of our recruiter asks us when we talk with recruits is like, people do move around a lot internally, and we'll find the things you're good at, or maybe your situation changes, you can't travel, or you want to travel more, or whatever. You're better with customers, you're better in sales, but we try to get people to at least stick around in their starting job for a year, which doesn't sound that hard, but there's already like, people kind of, and jobs aren't as rigid as they get in bigger companies. I mean, everyone's got their hands in everybody's projects and businesses, and we try to be very flat, which is good, I think.
Right. And then you also have the effect being a popular open source community that you can sort of interview people before they're hired. Like you can see their code and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not all about the code. It's a lot of it is culture and people. The people we hire, almost all of them are referrals. All of them are people from our community who are like, hey, we like you. We like we like you as a person. We see what you do. We know how you work. You would fit well over here. And
right.
I think one of the other podcasts, we have a lot of podcasters in our community. I guess myself included. And they had like 4 different podcasts were represented, and all of them worked for Chef.
That's right.
I think it's interesting though, Matt, right? You hit on the, I hear this number all the time, the 1 year. It's the magic 1 year. Like I've gotten to the point, I think a lot about that. Like, cause like people are like, well, if you go to a job and people are like, you hate it, there's always like, well, I should stay a year. Or like just what you said, or someone's like, well, it's clear you don't really you're not good at this job, or you would be really a lot better at this other job. Okay, we should maybe wait and do that next year. And it's just a weird, like, I don't know why, like, it's become the de facto, like, why not a month? Why not 2 years, right? It's just interesting because I just see that number pop up over and over again.
Well, any new job takes a while to just ramp up, to get the lay of the land, all the, the ebb and flow of, not necessarily politics, but just, how people work together, and, and you're new and you don't know what to ask, and there's all sorts of legacy history, I don't know. I
don't know. I guess I've kind of gone the other way. It's like, I don't think it takes that long at all. I think like a month, like, enough. Probably 60 days. Like, a lot. You probably know whether it's a good fit or not. You really know.
Oh yeah.
What's going to go well. Yeah. Where you may have been. Like, if you will, go back to that person in 60 days and say, now that you've been here 60 days, because I love to ask this question when I'm talking to people about jobs. Like, hey, what do you know 60 days into a job that you didn't know before, right? And so I don't know. I think in some ways, like why we don't just accelerate all of that more, or at least be open to it, right? I mean, sure. To your point, maybe you should be there a year because like you're just getting to know everything. But there's also the times where it's very clear, for everybody, like a change should be made, and the sooner the better, right?
Is it Zappos or Netflix or one of them that after like 30 days or 60 days they'll give you $10,000 to leave? Or one of them has a deal like that where they'll say, well, this wasn't going to work out. You can just opt to change jobs and leave our company.
Yeah, I think that definitely is a thing. And I always speaking of like your parents, as it were, right? Like there's this notion of like, my not every time, but often when I see my dad, he'll joke with me and say, so do you still have the same job? Because he was an IBM lifer until he figured out that was a bad idea in the when was it, in the 90s? Oh, I know what happened. They sold his company off, so he didn't really have a choice in the matter. And speaking of divestitures, and so I don't know. I mean, it seems like is like 2 years the right amount of time to stay at a job nowadays? Like to Brandon's point, like. I remember, you work at a big company, people are always considering their options. And so you would have discussions with people, and they always were very worried about length of time at job and stability. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of sway to Brandon's thinking where, I ended up talking with a lot of people as an analyst. And so I go look at their LinkedIn, and I wouldn't say it happens all the time, but it's not unexpected to see people at jobs for like odd numbers of months. Like I was there 5 months, I was there 8 months, I was there, like some amount of months. And you could even find spots where they're like trying to find the job that fits right for them. See, I even put it in a charitable way, right? Like they're kind of cycling through finding stuff, and then they finally find something that works for them, and they work there longer. And there's almost a profile of, I guess there's a negative profile of that kind of candidate, to put it that way. Not that I've looked at candidates where they worked at traditional companies for a long time up to the 90s, and then they start cycling through a whole bunch of companies trying to find ones that fit them better. But it does seem like this notion of like stability. I don't know if that's an issue. Like it gets to the thing Brandon was talking about, where it would be nice to structure work with companies on a mutually beneficial project basis, right? Like maybe I don't want to commit and like be part of this company, but I want to work on something with you and see if it sorts out, and then work on another thing and see if that sorts out. And like part of what I want to do is see if this company is a good fit for me or not. You know, and then maybe you can avoid laying off like half of 100,000 people.
Well, I mean that's a consulting model. I mean, lots of consulting companies are like, well, we will come in and we will be your partner around this particular tech stack, or this project, long term, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Either something you're not good at, or
I mean the issue with that, and maybe ultimately this discussion turns into the old Churchill thing about democracy, right? That like full-time employment is awful, but it's better than the alternatives, and that is like, having been and also consumed consultants, the way you make margin in a consulting business is sort of like, I don't know, something of a labor bait and switch. Like you come in with the really expensive, like overqualified people, and then you get a bunch of junior people to do the work, like at bigger consulting shops. And so it is like that system is easily gameable is the point, right? Whereas and then to the point Brandon was making, I don't know if a market for individual sole proprietor consultancies is easy enough.
I mean, I know a fair number of folks who are, 1 person, 2 person, 3 person shops, and it's hard, but in this industry, you can charge a premium for that. You can say, hey, this is my rate, and here's my resume. I'm good at this stuff, and I'm going to show up. I'm going to knock it out of the park, and you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And when it's done, I'm going to walk away, and maybe you can hire me again. And it's a hard, and there's lots of people doing it. It's hard. You're always scrambling to find new business, to get your profile out there. You speak at conferences, you write books to bring more attention back to your company. And eventually you kind of get burned out. I mean, you get burned out, and you go work at a slightly bigger company. There's a fair number of folks on our consulting team that they've had that model. They were at 5-person startups or 2-person consulting firms, and after a while the grind gets to you, and you're like, hey, somebody else can be HR. Somebody else.
And you see a lot of mid-size and larger tech companies kind of vacuuming up those types of people. That's happened quite a bit.
But you don't buy those companies. That's the thing. It's like you don't buy consulting shops of 3 people.
The
so it's like,
on that are terrible.
All you're going to do is grind at that business. You can grind it up to a bigger company, and then you can get to the model of having your junior folks and get to 20 and 100, and someone then have a little bit of specialization and benefits. But I don't know it.
But I got to go back to your cycling thing, Cote, because I think you kind of outlined like what I always think is like the asymmetrical nature of like job hiring and searching, right? It's like, like definitely when you look at someone's resume, you kind of like take stock of their tenures at different places, right? But I always think, and then if there's like more movement or no movement, you kind of ask why, and it's a common question. But the flip side is like you'd never have that same conversation with like the broader company. Like I think it would be great if a company was like, well, here's our turnover rate, here's our length time
right.
people have, because I mean, that's the kind of question that you would like that should come up that gives the candidate some idea of, okay, how, like, I may move around a lot, but how often do you either move people around or
is there a culture of layoffs here?
But not even that. I think sometimes there's that, which is often easier to find out than just about like, well, a lot of people have come through these jobs and left on their own. Right. And there could be a pattern. Right. And that's because I think that's what people are asking when a candidate has moved around, they're kind of like looking for a pattern. Was that just a unique situation, or is there something bigger there? And I think the same thing with questions. And I often say this, and to your point, Cote, earlier, it's like that person that moved around, they just had no other option. Right. Like the only way to work at a company and know about it was like, well, all I could do is take the job. There's no other way to get to know you. And then you get there, and I always say this, it's like, if I could just wave my wand, I would say like, let's do away with most of the job interview process. And like me as a candidate, I really just want to see the last 300 emails that my potential boss sent. Right? I just want to read through that, right? Like that would take me probably an hour, and then I'll give him like, I would like to give the equivalent of like, okay, because I don't know how many times I've been in a job. I just think email behavior like is such an indicative indicator if you're going to love a job or hate a job or just be in the middle. And it's that easy, right? I mean, if you go to the job, and I don't know how many times this is my own personal experience, but you've been in a job for like a week or two, and then like if you will, it's like the email like, hey, it's great to have so and so on the team. You went to the lunch, and then now you're in the normal email stream, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, like this is
insanity.
Different than what I was thinking. To my point about earlier, it's like you may be like, I'm not so sure this is going to be the greatest place. So I don't know. Again, I come back to symmetry. I wish there was more symmetry in that process.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, I interview a fair number of people and screen them, and I try to just throw that all out there. It's like, well, people in these positions we don't have a lot of churn here. We have, but if you're over here in sales or, whatever, there's churn, and, just lay it out there. Like, this is what the job looks like. This is how we roll. And, some people are like, I've had people like, wow, I've never heard like that. And I'm like, well, maybe I don't know how to interview right. Maybe I'm just like oversharing, and HR hasn't had that talk with me yet. But like the people that I do hire are always like, it was kind of like what you said it would be like. I'm like, I told you, and that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean that's always my my advice to myself and other people is, when I would interview people, I would try to give them as realistic a view of the daily life as possible. It's almost like to do it my own like kind of darker way of what you're saying. My interview technique is basically like, are you sure you want to work here? Because like if I get someone on, I don't want them to be shocked and surprised about the stream so much as Brandon was describing it, right? Like inevitably in any job there's sort of like this stream, and to be even more metaphoric, you interviewed someone next to a quiet babbling brook in like a nice evergreen forest, and everything was great, and you had some tea, and then all of a sudden you go off to Arizona and there's like these rapids that you're supposed to ride next. Yeah, and that's kind of like it's better to start with the rapids and be like, see those rapids over there, I'm going to put you in a tiny boat or maybe a life vest that has one side to it, and you're supposed to float down it. Is that what you want to do? And it also evokes I'm always eager to contrast, like, I don't know, programmer life with white collar life, and I think that there's you were kind of alluding to it, even though you kind of straddle the two things from time to time, Matt. But like, it is there seems to be a lot more stability in programmer job life, right? It's sort of like your job is going to sit down and program and design things, and at worst you'll move from project to project, but you'll kind of do the same thing. And Brandon going over the stream thing makes me remember, I still am often shocked at how fluid the roles are of white collar workers, right? Like you might get hired to do one thing one year, and all of a sudden you shift around to doing something else. And like, there really is very little stability in what white collar people do versus programmers. And I think that's also part of the annoyance of the hiring process is like, and thinking about like, my short 2-year tenure at Dell, like I think most everyone I met there had done like 4 or 5 different things. Like they hadn't like stuck to one thing that they did. They would move around, and that's another. It kind of engenders this mentality in what's the reverse of hiring, taking on a job at some place where, and people would even say it this way, you just want to get in the door, right? Yeah. Like you get in there, and then you can kind of like crowd surf the different opportunities that are there.
Well, but that's the attraction to startups. It's like, well, I know I'm not going to get pigeonholed as like, I'm going to code from 9 to 5 and that's it. And at big companies, a lot of people, that's their job. It's like, I clock in, I clock out, I'm done.
Say hello to the sheepdog, eat a lunch.
Exactly. Say hello to the sheepdog, Yeah, I mean, that's there's different personalities. I mean, we've talked about this before, like the startup personalities, the mid-level company, and the end of life company, shutting it down. I mean, they're definitely different personality types, and some people, they want to be there when the company has 8 people, and they're writing code, they're maintaining HR, they're setting up the servers, they're signing contracts. I mean, that's more fun to me. I guess that's me. But I know plenty of people. I'm like, what do you do? They're like, I design the faceplates on servers. Boom.
Yeah.
And you like that? And they're like, I come home every day and I never think about work. And I'm like, oh, and they're like, meanwhile, I'm like, here we are podcasting, talking about work.
Yeah. Yeah. Meta work.
I always do. I mean, I do sort of say like the startup I think there's just too much startup mythology out there. I mean, I just think so many times there's so much written about it. Like I always feel like there's like two tracks out there. There's sort of like this like press business pornography, right? And then it's actually put some links into the show notes about like this Sarah Lacy. She wrote like a really, direct assessment of several leaders. I mean, she uses, I won't use it because I'm not sure we're trying to sit, in case there are kids in the car and when you're listening to the podcast, I'll just say use the a-hole word quite effectively. And I think that's just something that, again, like there's the world of like, oh, these startups are great. We're changing the world. Everyone loves us. And then there's like, you go work at a few startups and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. This isn't even close, right? And I do think, all of us, I mean, I know what you're saying. There definitely are different styles and personalities, but at the same time, I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. It's like people want to know, what does success look like? Can we work together as a team? Like it can be more simple, right? And then you get into like, talk about 10 years at a company, tenure at a company, like a startup. I think, anyone that was at a startup for any period of time, I think that's like a dog year. Like 1 year at a startup, you could have been through 3 different product strategies, numerous executives, couple rounds of funding, couple VCs. It's like, that would take a large company 10 years to do. So it's like a year at a startup. It's like, I don't know. I just look at people that have been in startups totally different, right? I'm just like, you are going to come with a unique perspective to your next job, no matter what it is.
But I mean, I agree with Lacey's article about, there are a lot of assholes out there, and, maybe startup culture attracts more, or maybe like larger companies, they get diluted. And so there definitely is a big mythology around it. I mean, I think, unless you're one of the founders, I don't want to be at a startup until,
right.
Until 16,
maybe they haven't,
until number 16, right?
I would have been 12. I didn't want to relocate to Seattle, but
exactly.
but once somebody has like an A round of funding, it's actually a safe place to be.
Maybe I mean, it's the obvious thing to point out, but maybe that's why they call it an A round, because it's full of a-holes.
No.
Yeah?
No. I mean, I there are plenty of good startups.
That's true.
Doing startups.
And then also to balance it out, right? I mean, there's plenty of annoying people in big companies too, right? Like I think the rule is that no group of people can be guaranteed to be perfect just because it belongs to some part of culture or society, right? Like there's big companies that are great, loving places and they're all wonderful. And then there's small companies that are like that. And then there's small and big companies that are also full of like annoying folks. So like, it all depends. Like there's plenty of bad people to pass around. There's nothing about the structure of either a large tech company or a small company that guarantees niceness. In fact, it takes a lot of effort to make sure that you don't fall into being terrible, right? Like it takes more effort to be nice than not nice. Yeah. And I would argue whether you're a startup that's like stressed out all the time or whether you're a big company that I guarantee you is also stressed out all the time, right? Like in both cases, it's difficult to get along.
Yep.
So why don't we rack up? Is rack up the right word? Wrap up. See, we recorded a little early. Usually we record in the afternoon, but we recorded at 9:30, and I've only had 1 cup of coffee, so I don't function well. Speaking of being an a-hole, I don't know how that works. What recommendations do we have this week? How about we start with you, Brandon?
Okay, I've got a new podcast that probably many people have already heard, but let me start it this way. There's a new movie, Ben Affleck's and new movie Gone Girl. It's a little like murder mystery, right? You kind of, something has happened. You have to figure out what it is. And I highly recommend that if you're looking to see a movie. But if you can't go to the movies because you got the kids or whatever, the guys from This American Life have started a podcast called Serial.
Yeah. Kim just showed me that the other night.
It is fantastic. And what they're doing is in this case, they're actually kind of, again, much like a murder mystery. They're exploring, it's a true life story, so it's not fiction, but they're going through and kind of analyzing how this person was convicted of a crime. And every week they're releasing one episode that kind of gives you more information about what went on, who went on. And I have to say, it's just fascinating. It's like a book, a great book or movie. You just get enthralled. So it's like every Thursday when it comes out, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to listen to it.
Is it like fiction or nonfiction?
No, it's nonfiction. They're following it. So
okay.
And they do all the great things that are about a podcast. They have a lot of interviews. So you're hearing lots of different perspectives, and they're kind of like, putting it into a narrative form for you. So if you can't go see a movie and, just download the Serial podcast, and that's probably an hour a week, and we'll see how it plays out. And I don't know how many episodes they're going to have, but they just say they'll have as many episodes as they need to get to the end of the subject. So highly recommend it.
Yeah. Kim described that to me, and she showed me this delightful video of an old lady, as she said, on the dark side of 85, explaining how to listen to and subscribe to a podcast. And cheesy video aside, it did seem like an interesting premise, right? Like, it reminded me of a related thing. Like, did you guys ever listen to This Developer's Life?
Yeah.
Like, it was a similarly like an interesting newish approach to doing a podcast, if you will. Obviously, it was patterned after This American Life, but
yeah,
it was very nice.
Didn't that podcast, like, the last episode, he got cancer or something? I mean, I
remember something like
that.
My
feed, but it was like, oh, this is not good.
I don't remember. I mean, I figured he just shut it down because, like, having made podcasts for many years, like, that podcast must have taken a tremendous amount of time to make. Like,
yeah, he had sponsors and editors, and it was good.
But yeah, I mean, that's a that's a sub recommendation for me. You should go listen to This Developer's Life. It's not topical, so you can, like, even though it's several years old, you can just listen to it.
Yeah. I mean, I went back and listened to all of them.
So how about you, Matt Ray? What's your recommendation?
Well, man, now I'm like shuffling around looking through some of the stuff.
Why do you think I always ask you guys first?
Because you get to riff off us, and like, my idea is tangential to yours.
Indeed.
So one of the things that I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. In addition to all the chef related ones, but that Serial one, that sounds like another big time commitment. I mean, I got a lot of hour-long ones to listen to, and but
so what you want is something like 99% Invisible, which is like a 10-minute time.
Yeah, those are good. Those are definitely good. But now he's putting those out weekly, so there's even more of those. Hours in the day, my friend. But books on tape. I just found out that the Austin Public Library allows you to download audiobooks.
What?
Yeah, right?
How is that legal?
So you can have it, they can only check out like one or two at a time. And so it just like a regular book, someone has, the token that says you have this thing checked out. And my kids listen to a lot of audiobooks, like, Magic Treehouse and A to Z Mysteries. And, you'll get into that soon, Cote.
They don't read like the Encyclopedia Brown and
those two. The problem with Encyclopedia Brown is there's only like 10 of those, right?
Oh.
Magic Treehouse, like, there's 50 some.
Whoa.
And yeah. So I've got about 30 or 40 on a iPod. But they you can check them out from Austin Public Library, and it'll convert them to iPods or iPhones or MP3 players or your Kindle or whatever. Kind of cool. So go see, and they also have ebooks, so you can check things out for your Kindle, which is strange.
What?
I know, right? It's cool.
I don't understand what's happening here. This is not supposed to be happening in the digital world. The library is supposed to go under and just not be successful. But now it sounds like it's wonderful. I'm gonna check it out.
Go to your Austin Public Library. Go to your city's library. See what
you need to do is fly into Austin to go to the public library. Just come to the Austin Public Library, not in your town, the Austin one.
Yes, or something like that. Soon it'll just be a kiosk. You like pushing the buttons and it drops out a thumb drive.
So I'll have two recommendations. One of them will be a way of doing a review. So we were at our conference this week, HCTS, which you can no longer get $400 off unless you have a time machine to go to. But I helped host a dinner with SolidFire, and they gave me these Bose noise canceling earphones to show their appreciation. And I've always been suspicious of like noise canceling things, and they don't really like cancel all the noise at all, but they do make life more pleasant. And my recommendation would be like, don't spend $250 on them, but if you can get them for free, they're definitely like worthwhile. They're nice to use and they keep your ears warm. So like the idea of total noise canceling is kind of crazy, but it removes enough of the nutty noise in your life that it's nice. And then second, I did get an iPhone. You see, a little iPhone 6. And, a lot of people have asked me what I think about it. And people are always complaining about the size. And I didn't get a 6 Plus. I got a 6. And I think it's fine. Like it's little, I went from a 4S to a 6. So maybe the 5 is the optimal size and I just don't know it. But like, I think it's a nice big size. Like it's not too big and it is a little hard to like reach the upper, is this right side of the screen. But
you need
I don't know. I think it's worthwhile getting the new phone, especially, I guess the 5 has it, but it's got that thumbprint thing to log in with. That thing's awesome. It's a little scary. Like I wasn't sure if I should hook up 1Password to use it or not, but yeah, I like it. You just open your phone by putting your thumbprint on there. So, if you're hesitating, you should just get a new iPhone. It'll work. Unless you're Matt Ray and you want to update your rocker.
Oh.
Love the rocker.
That was a good phone.
I know. I bring it up all the time because I think you were beyond bleeding edge. You were sort of like fetus edge on that. Like very.
You're like, why? It was like, why is there an edge over there?
It was awesome. Listen to tunes on your rocker.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the recommendations, and I'm sure next week I'll apologize for accusing all A-round startups of being assholes. That wasn't my intention. It just sounded funny. But as always, I recommend highly that you subscribe to my newsletter at coteindustries.com/memo. I find it insanely entertaining, and I'm sure you will too. And we're always at softwaredefinedtalk.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast feed in iTunes or Overcast. And we always appreciate getting feedback, even though we've gone over none here. But it's nice to hear what you like and don't like. And we'll see everyone next time.
Thanks.
Thanks.